Waiheke. No, your sound was absolutely fine for a moment. Yeah, this is the poor people on YouTube are seeing how the sausages is done, especially when we don't have is just when we don't have Simon and Bon. Bon, we can't. I can't. Can anybody just send me a message, please, on YouTube in the chattery part, please, if you can hear Bernard, because I can't. No, I don't think they can either, Bernard. You've killed the live stream apparently as well. Yeah, this is when I hum the Marseillaise.
Okay, I'm back here,
You are back here.
and you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay, but apparently the live stream has ended, Bernard. Is that right, everybody?
Yes, I think it's should be restarted again. It's saying it's live streaming. Bugger. This is what happens when you bump your
Yep.
microphone.
There we are. Tickety boo. Off you
Cool.
go.
So we're back.
So Bernard, you were going to talk about the implications for us here, but implications worldwide really of Trump pursuing Jerome Powell really quite so aggressively, and also the Federal Reserve's his really remarkable response to issue a video on a Sunday saying essentially this far and no further, and then to have a lot of support from central bank governors around the world, including ours.
Yeah, I mean, this is a key moment in the battle between Jerome Powell and Donald Trump. This has been building for a long time. There was that extraordinary, and they always seem to be extraordinary, TV appearances when Trump and Powell went on a joint wander around the Fed's headquarters, which is at the center of at least the stated reason Trump has given for his Department of Justice launching criminal charges against Powell for not detailing what went on with that renovation. And until now, Jerome Powell has been a very careful, loyally, because he's originally a lawyer, loyally public servant here, not criticizing Donald Trump in public. And actually his video statement, which I recommend to everyone because it's quite short, is very thoughtful and careful and direct in saying our job is to run monetary policy independently. If we cut interest rates too much, we could overheat the economy, create inflation, and create a bigger bust down the track than we should. And that Donald Trump's White House is trying to intimidate us into lowering interest rates more than we should. And that really focused people's attention on the idea that an independent Federal Reserve is incredibly important, not just for the US economy, but for everyone. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. The world's financial markets, bond markets, currency markets, stock markets are all dependent essentially on an article of faith. And that is that the US dollar is a reliable currency you can be sure will be there tomorrow and won't suddenly devalue or be declared null and void. And when you have a politician control that currency in a deep way, as Donald Trump wants to do, that calls into question the fundamental glue at the heart of the global economy. So this really matters. Now, to the point where, as you say, Republican senators, as well as Democrats, and central bankers have all stood up and said, right, no more messing around with the fundamental architecture of the global economy. This isn't something that you can do between commercial breaks on a reality TV show. This is dangerous. Stop. And so that's why Anna Bremen, the new Reserve Bank governor, added her name to the list of 14 central bank governors. And you've got to remember, she's a former deputy governor of the Riksbank, the Swedish central bank, who are also on the list saying enough. And she did it in the middle of the night. She didn't have time to tell Nicola Willis or
Allegedly.
Winston Peters
Yeah.
about it. And then yesterday, Winston Peters came out with a pretty extraordinary statement, really, of his own. I don't think I've seen a minister, let alone an MP, say in
And
public.
let alone the minute, because he did it also under his Minister of Foreign Affairs handle.
Yes, exactly. So it
Not
wasn't.
an NZ First handle. It's done there now too, but his original comments went out as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, saying, "Hang on a minute, we don't agree with this. Stay in your lane. This is not the advice the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would have given you."
Yeah, which is interesting because what he's essentially saying is that the governor of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand should not advocate for central bank independence. Now, that seems like an obvious thing to say now, but in 1989, when the Reserve Bank Act passed, we were the first government to specify in legislation that a central bank should be independent when setting monetary policy. And Winston Peters' party at the time, the National Party, voted for it. Now, as I've discovered this afternoon, Winston himself didn't.
Oh, really?
He managed to avoid being in Parliament when the vote was taken. He argued against it in the caucus. And when he lost that battle in caucus, he just exempted himself so he could say in the future, "Well, I never voted for it."
I haven't seen that written up elsewhere, Bernard. That's a very good line.
Yeah, and he did, though, subsequently vote for an amendment to the Reserve Bank Act in 2018 when he was in partnership with the Labor Party in government, in which they amended it, the Reserve Bank's remit to have both an employment and an inflation objective. And in doing so, he essentially, if not directly, then indirectly agreed to an independent central bank. So Winston Peters is not only accusing the Reserve Bank governor of doing something which she very much has the right to do under the Reserve Bank Act, but he's
Although it has
effectively
nothing to do with New Zealand policy, does it? Or do you argue that it does because she is in fact defending an existing central bank policy?
Yeah, and New Zealand is part of a network of central banks. So you've got to remember, during the global financial crisis, the US Federal Reserve granted New Zealand and a whole bunch of other central banks so-called swap lines, essentially printed US dollars and said, you can use these if you need to. And we did. So it really matters. We have direct relationships with the US Federal Reserve. It's important it is independent. And not to mention that if there was some sort of implosion of trust in the US Federal Reserve and the US dollar, that would definitely have an impact on the New Zealand economy, which the Reserve Bank governor is responsible for protecting.
And
So
why do you think markets haven't gone ballistic yet? Because there's two questions. Gold and precious metals have gone up, which is store of value and so on. The dollar hasn't gone down as much as one. It's dipped a little bit. What do you make of the market reaction? And then also, it's presumably extremely good for cryptocurrency.
well, if you believe in cryptocurrency.
No. Well, who? I mean, I believe there's somebody in the Oval Office who has very heavy crypto investments now as well.
Yes, and a history of selling things or promising things that don't turn out to be true. So this is so important for global markets, to the point where you're right. The stock markets actually hit new record highs afterwards. Bond yields didn't move that much, and the US dollar only fell about 0.3%, which is nothing dramatic. The reason for that is that almost immediately, as soon as Jerome Powell made that statement, a bunch of Republican senators, in particular the Banking Committee, which Trump needs to appoint his preferred members to the Federal Open Markets Committee and as governors of the Fed, and also to appoint a new Fed chair because Jerome Powell is due to go in May. And they came out and said, we will not approve any Trump proposals to go onto the Fed board if he goes ahead with this legal action against Jerome Powell. So essentially, this was finally some grown-ups stood up in the Republican Party and said no more. Now, the financial markets believe them so far, And as we get closer to the November midterms, where it looks like there's going to be a Republican wipeout that changes control, at least in the House, if not the Senate, then Trump's powers really do wane.
Yeah, personally, I
And,
think it's a very big if that there's going to be
yes. And so
a normal election.
I also agree. I think financial markets should have reacted more. But for now, they trust the checks and balances. We'll see.
Okay, and one other thing about this, Bernard, just to go back to something I brought up at the beginning about the DACA, when I was looking at some of the feedback to Winston's comments today, you get the globalism, the attacks on the WEF, and the idea of the Rothschilds being in charge of the global conspiracy of central banks, and that we're all, and you know what that means. And I think there are some, this is the audience to which Winston is playing to some extent, and he needs to be extremely careful of this.
Yeah, there's on the fringes some ugliness. I mean, there is a genuine argument to be made for central banks not being independent, and you could argue that central bank independence over the last 20 years, in combination with a neoliberal approach to government finances, has made us all worse off. And that we need to go back to something like in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, when central banks weren't independent, when effectively governments of the world were able to use what they call fiscal dominance, i.e. borrow lots of money to spend it on military matters, run up big debts, and then essentially inflate away the debts by forcing pension funds and banks to buy the bonds cheaply. Now, you could argue that was a better way for regular
It also
people.
required a gold standard
It did.
to some extent.
Yeah, I actually think, I mean, the gold standard was dropped at various points. The US devalued its link to gold, and then also dropped it completely under Nixon in 71. So there was a long period when we didn't have a gold standard where central bank non-independence did seem to work, albeit with some inflation. And the question then is, should we still have independent central banks? I think that's worth debating. But what Trump is up to here is off. It really is ugly and dangerous, and we have to hope that the financial market relaxedness is not just cloud cuckoo land, and that the global financial system gets away with it being alive by the time we get to the end of Trump.
All right,
We'll see.
Shall we do a quick skateboarding dog and then sign off? And then I look forward to the edit of this, because we've rather lost most of our live audience, and apologies for that, but I know you'll splice it together beautifully. The skateboarding dog this week is a slightly sad one from China, where of course we've got shrinkage of the population, and it's an app called Are You Dead that checks up on people living alone. Is now the most popular paid app on the Apple Store in China. And it is called Sile Mi in Chinese, or Are You Dead? And it requires users to check in by pressing a button. If they fail to do so over 2 consecutive days, the app sends a message to an emergency contact nominated by the user. Are you dead? Are you there, Bernard?
I am here, Peter. I am here. That's right. Even though about 10 minutes ago I probably wasn't.
We'll sign off then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you all next week, everyone. We'll be back on the Hoon.